We have been hit now with ads on a feed about it by being responsible on buying an $80,000 Volvo to save the planet. Now, I don't know how that saves anything other than Volvo, because who's got $80,000? And for Volvo to put an ad what says it's responsible to buy a Volvo, an electric Volvo, is an irresponsible ad at times when people are struggling to put food on the table and struggling to pay rents and mortgages. And it's sort of sarcastic as well, because who's got $80,000? And all those people who paid enormous money for all the cars they're buying, and these cars will last a decade or 20 years, the cars last 20 years or 30 years, then this is a disaster in a way for people, because if you cannot trade in your petrol guzzler, if you like, because it's got no value, because it's now irresponsible not to trade it into anything other than an electric car, then there's a lack of conversation going on here in the corporate structure, and the government's talking about bringing these electric cars in regards to who can afford them and how fast they can to beat the market. The car fleet can actually replace the car fleet now, can be replaced by electric car fleet, because surely the recent rains, which have gone for quite some time on the east coast of Australia, indicate that solar panels and wind are not going to provide the baseload power to recharge electric cars. And you could do it small, because you've only got a very tiny percentage of cars are EVs at the moment. And then there's a cost of having the apparatus put into your shed, if you've got one, to charge you up. And if you don't live in a place where you've got a garden or a shed or somewhere to park your car in a flat and stuff like that, there's enormous problems then in creating the billions of dollars required to create the infrastructure that they put the cables and the recharging points in across all the thousands of units that have been built in Australia. It's something that I suspect people aren't thinking about when it comes to saying we want electric cars, because at the moment it's an empty argument based on profits for corporations, and it does not consider the climate at all. That change of climate obviously may mean that solar power is no use at all when it comes to charging electric, never mind electric cars, never mind running railway services and all the other things. It would be far wiser for the society if it wants to, and because it's about transport is a problem, not the car. Forget climate change and all that. The actual problem is transport. The problem is, how do you change the way people transport themselves to and from work? How do you do that? Well, the idea would be to have lots of, if you want to really be serious about commuting around cities in particular, when most of the pollution is caused because of traffic jams, what you'd be really serious about, what you would replace those motor cars with small 30-seater buses, what run on no timetable, but are constantly going all the time, rechargeable electric buses, and as many as them on the road as you can. And then you would have no need for people to have expensive cars to get backwards and forwards to work or just to do shopping. That can be done by electric buses. That's just a fee, and they're rechargeable, and that makes more sense than one person buying an electric Volvo for $80,000. And I think Volvo's been irresponsible in not developing cars for the mass market. If Volvo wants to make a clever something to do with climate change, what would be responsible for the corporate system, who are going to profit out of the change, would be to the transition, because nothing can be done without profit. What the need is, Volvo should actually produce a car what's affordable for the average or the low income people. on a lease system, that means the payment of the lease is equivalent to rego and the weekly sort of petrol cost at a lower cost as possible, because the idea of transport is to get people back and forwards to work and moving, and then the less you're spending on that, the more money there is into the economy. Then if we're all going to spend enormous amounts of money on electric cars and paying them off, we won't, regardless how they might not use much, they don't use fuel, nonetheless, there's still a big cost burden that people might not be able to afford right now or in far into the future if they do not take hold, if we take into consideration the possible financial shocks to the system that increase in interest rates will bring, and the massive inflation and cost of fuels or foods and all that, and rents and housing, will make sure, no matter what the government spends on trying to do something about climate change, if it doesn't get the fundamentals and the foundations and principles right, what protects society from the economic problems created by the past poor decisions in the past, political and financial decisions in the past, then it's not actually doing anything about protecting humanity from climate change at all. It seems to me climate change is a thing you can say, but it has no meaning other than you attach a meaning to yourself for saying it. I want something to do about climate change. Well, yes, we would like something done about climate change, but it must be sensible, practical, pragmatic and positive for the society and the economy, and not just another gimmick, sales gimmick for companies now having to go to these electric vehicles because of emission controls in places like Europe and China or wherever, or America. And so they're creating this market, but they're not creating the vehicles or looking at the transport systems that would reduce the need for transport, reduce the need for mass transport, or reduce the need for cost of mass transport. And there's two ways. Electric buses run with no timetable, just running all the time, just around and around they go. They could be self-controlled or whatever, but it's one way. And the other way is to adopt a Volvo to produce sensibly with its partners in China a car that's robust enough for Australia for less than $20,000, and then charge it a lease fee that anyone can afford, even on the lowest income, because even the lowest income people most of them have cars, vehicles. They need one in Australia to get to the shops and to get around, because public transport is all right in the cities to some degree, but in the bush it's almost non-existent. And unless people are considering the holistic problem as a holistic problem and a practical problem that needs to be solved pragmatically and with some sort of economic nous and makes economic sense, then I'm sorry, but the climate change push right now, it seems to be rather cynical exercise by Volvo and people like that, saying buy a new electric Volvo, and when you look at the price of them, you go, well, who can afford that? Yes, some people can, but $80,000 for a new car, and they want to sell these want this to replace our old cars with an $80,000 vehicle? Well, you can't go anywhere, really. How far are you going to go with that across Australia? You can't take a trip through the outback in it. You might be able to in a few years' time, but as yet, they're simply commuter vehicles, what are limited in where they can go. So Volvo, in a way, has got its marketing and its strategy wrong. It's all right for other countries or where the money is, but in regards to Australia, it's totally wrong, because what you need in a vehicle that's cheap to buy for commuter transport in cities, and people can lease, and it costs no more than it does for fuel to purchase and rego to purchase. And then you have an answer that makes sense in regards to being responsible driving an electric car, or irresponsible driving a fossil fuel car. How can it be irresponsible to have to go to work in the car you can afford? Because if you can't afford to trade your car because you're going to lose so much money on it, and they've got years of life left in them, there's problems there are being created. no answers to, because it seems to me the politicians and corporations are afraid to actually really look at the things from a social perspective rather than just a corporate and political perspective, PC perspective. So I think it's irresponsible of Volvo to say it's responsible to drive an electric Volvo when it's so expensive. Well, if we wanted to put some actual effort in regarding to reducing CO2 and involving with cars, they'd have one, they'd be knocking them out for $15,000 or something like that, so people can afford to have them. And then it wouldn't seem to me be such a cynical exercise in using climate change as a means to make people feel responsible or irresponsible when they've got no choice in the matter. It all depends on their financial and economic situation, how they make their decisions about what they purchase in the future.